Hello. So in this video we're going to talk about one of my absolute favorite poets, Dylan Thomas. So Dylan Thomas was a Welsh poet. Some would say the most important Welsh poet. I would certainly say the most important Welsh poet, but I'm biased because I love Thomas's work. He was a mid-20th century poet. He was born in 1914, and he died in 1953. Yeah. So he was very much a writer of the modernist period, but the thing that is really amazing about Dylan Thomas's poetry is the way he uses imagery. He's a master of shocking, startling, and unexpected visuals, of sounds, even of scents in his poetry. He brings these things to life in a way that's really, really unique and really, really engaging for listeners. And in terms, and I do say listeners specifically because even though we often talk about poetry as something that's meant to be read, something that's meant to be experienced through the ear rather than read on the page silently, I think with Dylan Thomas that's so important because the rhythms and the cadences and the sounds of the imagery he constructs are really central to the experience of hearing these poems. And actually he did a series of recordings in the 1950s, like I think 51 and 52, and they're available today. They're fantastic. You can hear Thomas reading a bunch of his short stories and a bunch of his poems, and to hear him read his own work is really, really amazing. And one of the things, I will talk about the poems, and I will read you one of his most famous ones, but one of the things that's so interesting about hearing him read is that he has command of multiple accents. So in the 30s and through World War II, Dylan Thomas worked for the BBC in London, and so he developed what we call a received pronunciation accent, which is the sort of London accent, not Cockney, but the sort of London accent that you would associate with people like the royal family, for instance. But he was also Welsh. He was raised in Wales, and Wales has a very distinct accent in the UK. There's a lilt to it. I'm going to try and do a Welsh accent, and it's probably not going to work very well. But when he was doing a Welsh character, Dylan Thomas could drop very much into the Welsh accent, which has this very distinct cadence. And I got the cadence right there, I think, but I didn't master the accent necessarily. But actually that's one of the things that are really interesting about Dylan Thomas's short stories, and to hear him read them, is when he's doing the voice of a Welsh character, he's definitely doing the voice of a Welsh character. Even if in sort of the rest of it, the first person narration and whatever it is, he's reading it in received pronunciation. His characters are distinctly Welsh. So, that being said, I want to read you his poem Fernhelm, which is probably one of his top 3 most famous poems. And again, it's a fantastic poem in terms of the imagery and the sound of the language. Fernhelm. Now as I was young and easy under the apple boughs about the lilting house, and happy as the grass was green, the night above the dingle starry, time let me hail and climb, golden in the heydays of his eyes, and honoured among wagons I was prince of the apple towns, and once below a time I lordly had the trees and leaves, trail with daisies and barley down the rivers of the windfall light. And as I was green and carefree, famous among the barns about the happy yard, and singing as the farm was home, in the sun that is young once only, time let me play and be, golden in the mercy of his means, and green and golden I was huntsman and herdsman, the calves sang to my horn, The foxes on the hills barked clear and cold, and the Sabbath rang slowly in the pebbles of the holy streams. All the sun long it was running, it was lovely, the hayfields high as the house, and the tunes from the chimneys. It was air and playing, lovely and watery, and fire green as grass. And nightly under the simple stars, as I rode to sleep, the owls were bearing the farm away. All the moon long I heard, blessed among stables, the night jars flying with the ricks, and the horses flashing into the dark. And then to awake in the farm like a wanderer white with the dew come back, the cock on his shoulder. It was all shining, it was Adam and maiden. The sky gathered again, and the sun grew round that very day. So it must have been after the birth of the simple light in the first spinning place, the spellbound horses walking warm out of the whinnying green stable on to the fields of praise. And honoured among foxes and pheasants by the gay house under the new-made clouds, and happy as the heart was long, in the sun born over and over, I ran my heedless ways. My wishes raced through the house-high hay, and nothing I cared at my sky-blue trades, that time allows in all his tuneful turning, so few in such morning songs, before the children green and golden follow him out of grace. Nothing I cared in the lamb-white days that time would take me up to the swallow-thronged loft by the shadow of my hand, in the moon that is always rising, nor that riding to sleep I should hear him fly with the high fields and wake to the farm forever fled from the childless land. Oh, as I was young and easy in the mercy of his means, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. And actually that last few lines, time held me green and dying, though I sang in my chains like the sea. There's a great monument to Dylan Thomas in Swansea, Wales, where he was born, that has those lines engraved on it. And actually, a decade now ago, in 2010, I went to the UK and I took a weekend trip to Cardiff and to Swansea. And I did a couple of the Dylan Thomas things there, including going and seeing one of the pubs he loved drinking at, because he was an alcoholic, so that's in itself not a great thing. But also going and seeing some of the monuments to him, because he's one of the most famous residents of Swansea, Wales. And he wrote about it extensively. This was a thing, and actually, even from Fernhelm, we can get a sense of this. Dylan Thomas was fascinated by childhood and by children, by his own childhood, especially in his own experiences growing up. And so a lot of his most famous works are from the perspective of a child, or are about his memories of being a child. And even in Fernhill, we get these references to this sort of playful child's experience of being at this farmhouse. Fernhill was a farmhouse, I think of his aunt or someone. And so that's another thing that's really central to Dylan Thomas's work, is descriptions of childhood and writing from the perspective of a child. It's really, really important to him as a writer. But again, for me, what I love most about Dylan Thomas are these amazing, startling images that you would never, these images you would never put together, that he finds a way to put together and to create these great scenes.